Okay. Which one? Okay. The meeting of the Committee of the Whole House is resumed. Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, may we request the Secretary to kindly acknowledge the presence of the resource persons in the Committee of the Whole today.
The following are the resource persons today: Honorable Justice Adolfo S. Azcuna, Retired Justice, Philippine Constitution Association; Yusek Cristal Lin T. Uy, Undersecretary for Legislative Affairs, NEDA; Adoracion Navarro of PIDS; Ms. Hazel Parcon Santos, PhD, Researcher, Economist; Attorney Rica Sulit, OIC Director, Department of Finance; Dr. Adora Navarro, Senior Research Fellow; and Yusek Rosemary Edilion, Undersecretary, Policy and Planning Group, NEDA.
Good afternoon to all resource persons. Welcome to the House of Representatives. And thank you for joining us today. Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lagman.
Before we hear the statements of the resource persons this afternoon, I have some points for clarification. Number one, the Speaker said that the House would adopt in toto the Senate's resolution about Houses number 6. Did we hear this right, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Speaker, the RBH7, a reading of the RBH7 would indicate that they are exactly the same as that of the Senate, RBH6. So while the Speaker has said that, then still, we will still have to wait for the committee report on what, if the decision of the committee as a whole is to adopt in toto what is filed and refer to it and which is currently being deliberated.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Lagman.
When the floor leader said that the resolution of both Houses number 6 and number 7 are the same or identical, does he refer to the amendment of Articles 12, 14, and 16? And number 2, the amendatory process is under Section 1.1 of Article 17 on what is traditionally known as the Constituent Assembly. Number 3, the actual amendments to the economic provisions will be effected through legislation as capsulized in the phrase, quote, unless provided for by law, unquote. Is this correct?
The,
Floor Leader.
Ms. Speaker, what we are currently doing right now in the deliberation of RBH7 is we are just following our rules insofar as proposal of amending the Constitution, because as we have already said before, Congress, under the provision of the Constitution, Congress, by a vote of 3/4 of all of its members, may propose propose amendment or revision to the Constitution. Unlike the Senate, the House has, in adopting our rules, even before, not only this Congress but past Congresses, we have a specific provisions that pertains to how we can go about as a body in proposing amendments to the Constitution, which is provided under our rules. And under our rules, should we go that route, which we have done so, the said resolution shall be processed in the same manner as a bill is being processed in the House, meaning it should go to the first reading, which we have already done, and in fact was referred to the Committee of the Whole, which can also be done by the House. And we are currently in this situation. After this, then there will be a committee report, and then if we approve it on third reading, then we send it to the Senate.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I
Representative Lacson.
enumerated the similar or identical provisions in both resolutions, and I wish that the Honorable Floor Leader would confirm that these are the similar or identical provisions.
Identical, Speaker, insofar as the proposed amendment are concerned. The three.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please proceed, Representative Lacson.
is there any difference in the resolutory clause between the resolutions?
I understand, Mr. Chairman, that a reading of the resolution of the Senate is that there is a phrase, the House voting separately. But that phrase is absent in our resolution because there is no need for us to do so. Because, as I have said, we are processing this resolution in the manner that a bill is being processed. So we will vote on it, and after we vote on it, then we will send it to the Senate, and the Senate will vote on it. So that is a guarantee without expressly stating it in the resolution that it will be sent to the Senate for their vote, for achieving the 3/4 vote, should they so desire, in approving the proposed amendment, Mr. Speaker.
In other words, Mr. Chairman, there is a basic difference between the two resolutions. Because in the Senate, the resolutory clause says each House voting separately, while in the House version, there is no such statement. It merely says, resolved by the Congress upon vote of 3/4 of all its members, pursuant to Article 17 of the Constitution. Now, Mr. Chairman, if there is an impasse between the Senate, because they would insist that there should be a joint meeting voting separately, and in the case of the House would say that there is no need for this because we are proposing this through a legislative process. Now, who and how will the impasse be resolved?
Mr. Speaker, if our resolution, even though we approve it by a vote of at least 3/4, will reach the Senate and the Senate will not do anything about it, then that's it. Wala na tayo pag-uusapan na amendment, then it's dead. Because for the proposed amendment to be approved, there must also be an action by the Senate in approving the same by its 3/4 vote of all its members. So it doesn't matter whether that phrase of voting separately is not found in our RBH7, because we are already doing that. They will be voting on the same. If they approve their own RB6, and then our RB7 are likewise approved with the requisite vote, then I don't suppose that there will be a conflict. And my assumption would be it will be treated as a bill, like an enrolled bill. It will be an enrolled resolution, so to speak. And instead of referring it to the Office of the President for his signature, it will be referred to the COMELEC for the scheduling of the plebiscite as provided for in the Constitution.
In other words, Mr. Chairman, and I will be ending my inquiry, if there is no concurrence between the House and the Senate on these proposed amendments, the proposed amendments are dead in the waters.
Yun ho ang posisyon natin palagi sinasabi. And unless both houses of Congress would be able to approve the proposed amendments in the manner, ito nga 3/4 vote of all the members, and then there will be no proposed amendment to speak of. So patay na po.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Majority Leader.
And,
Mr.
Chairman, I move that
Floor Leader.
we continue consideration of resolution of both houses number 7 and request that the SecGen be directed to read the title of the resolution.
Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The Secretary General is directed to read the title of the resolution of both houses number 7.
Resolution of both houses number 7. A resolution of both houses of Congress proposing amendments to certain economic provisions of the 1987 Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines, particularly on Articles 12, 14, and 16.
Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, before we proceed with interpellations by the members, may we hear from our resource people who were not able to share their thoughts yesterday, and may I move to recognize Honorable former Justice of the Supreme Court, my former professor at Ateneo, Adolf Azcuna.
Mr. Chair.
The Honorable Justice Adolf
Mr. Chair.
Azcuna, former Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, is recognized.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
before-
Representative Palma.
Pardon?
You have the floor. Yes.
Yeah.
What's the pleasure?
Before the Associate Justice will be given the floor, I just want to have a point of clarification or inquiry. What will happen, because last night, Justice Puno promised that he will be here in today's meeting. And so I would like to inquire whether or not we are going to hear Justice Azcuna or Justice Puno would be available via Zoom or whatever platform that would be available.
I think
Justice
the
Azcuna was
yes,
not,
floor leader.
Justice Azcuna has not yet shared his thoughts, and that's why we are giving him the opportunity to share his thoughts before we proceed to the period of interpolation.
Anyway, Representative Palma will await. Maybe the former Chief Justice is on his way.
Okay. Thank you.
So the chair will now give the floor to the Honorable Justice Adolfo S. Azcuna. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the House of Representatives meeting as a Committee of the Whole. Magandang araw po sa inyo lahat. I have here a copy of your resolution of both houses, number 7. And I can see that it is almost the same as the resolution of both houses, number 6 of the Senate, except for a few provisions. In the resolution of both houses, number 6 of the Senate and your RBH number 7, both treat of the proposed amendments to the economic provisions of the present 1987 Constitution, particularly Articles 12, 14, and 16 of the Constitution, which covers public utilities, education, and advertising only. I was asked, and I am often asked, how sure are we that the Senate and the House will not add any other proposed amendments, particularly political in nature, and limit themselves to these proposed changes in the specified economic provisions of Articles 12, 14, and 16? My answer is that it is limited by the very form of the proposed resolution, which is in the form of a joint resolution of both houses, and it is subjected to the cardinal rule of one subject matter only that must be expressed in the title. So political matters are not covered because they're not in the subject matter stated in the title. So that is the safeguard. So as long as it is only resolution of both houses, number 6 of the Senate and number 7 of the House are the ones proposed and approved, then it will only be on economic provisions, and even then, only on Articles 12, 14, and 16. Now, Mr. Chair, our Constitution, the present Constitution, which was adopted in this hall 37 years ago. I was seated there, seat number 4, as a member of the Constitutional Commission. It has now been in force for 37 years, the longest running Constitution in our history, unamended. And the reason that it has not been amended is partly because of the ambiguous nature of Article 17, on the provision of how to amend or revise the Constitution. The ambiguous nature of the provision proceeds from the fact that originally, when we were adopting the present Constitution, the Committee on Legislative Power adopted a unicameral form of legislature to be called National Assembly. But when it was presented to the plenary voted by a difference of one vote to have a bicameral legislative body. I was the vice chair of the Legislative Committee. The chair was Hilario G. Davide Jr. And we both had to revise our draft. The present Article 6 on legislative power is one we had to redraft into a bicameral body. However, we failed to redraft what is now Article 17 on amendment and revision, because that was not our committee. So we did not touch it. So it remained worded as it was originally intended for a unicameral legislative body. That is why it does not distinguish whether the voting should be by separate vote of the chamber or joint. It just says by 3/4 vote of all the members. That is the reason for the ambiguity, and this ambiguity, I believe, is one of the reasons why until now there has been no change in our Constitution. Now, about some 5 years ago, I thought of a way of changing the economic provisions, or more particularly, the restrictive portions of the economic provisions of the Constitution. I consulted business leaders, including Washington CISEP, and my idea was to have as an amendment in the strategic places of the economic provisions the words, unless otherwise provided by law. That's my idea, Mr. Chair. And then Speaker Feliciano Belmonte Jr. agreed and adopted my idea and drafted resolution of both houses number 2, which precisely contained such a proposed amendment unless otherwise provided by law. However, that RBH number 2 did not pass. Now, the purpose and effect of such an amendment, Mr. Chair, is simply to make the provision that is to which it is attached, the unless otherwise provided by law, changeable by legislation. It does not do any other thing. It makes it changeable by legislation. This is, to me, the best solution to the economic provisions restriction, because economic provisions should be flexible and they should not be cast in stone. And 37 years is casting in stone. Economic provisions must be responsive to changes in economic conditions. Therefore, I believe that we should change the provisions to make them flexible by legislation, by simply adding as an amendment the words, unless otherwise provided by law. It has to be done in the precise places. Otherwise, you may be confronted with changing the bedrock principles. Don't change the bedrock principles. Change only the percentages of foreign investments allowed, as well as the percentages of management allowed. So do not change when it says that the natural resources belongs to the state. Don't change that. Change only when it says it has to be by a corporation, 60% Filipinos. Public utilities, in this case. You change that unless otherwise provided by law, so that a law then can be passed, an ordinary law can be passed, changing the 60-40 limitation. In Spain, for instance, their limitation is not 60-40. It is 51-49. That's still nationalistic. It's still controlled by the nationals, but not 60-40. And many foreign investors are happy with that, 51-49. You cannot do that now. You cannot. But if you have, unless otherwise provided by law, then a law can be passed converting it from 60-40 to 51-49. That is the effect of this proposed amendment, Mr. Chair. Makes the provision changeable by legislation. The RBH number 6, however, did not follow my formula, the Senate. I told them you should follow my formula. Why? They changed the word basic. They introduced the word basic. That's not in the Constitution. Don't add any word that's not in the Constitution. Just put unless otherwise provided by law. Let Congress define whether basic education should be allowed entry of foreigners or not. That should be by legislation. After such amendments are adopted, Mr. Chair, then Congress can adopt a master foreign investment law that will cover the framework for allowing foreign investments in our country, including, if necessary, safeguards such as reciprocity, for instance, and other safeguards. That's up to Congress. That should be up to legislation, not fixed in the Constitution. That is the philosophy behind this proposed amendment, Mr. Chair. Now, on the procedure, the problem we have is the procedure. Article 17 of the Constitution provides for 3 ways of changing the Constitution. First is by Congress, by a vote of 3/4 of all its members. Second is by a constitutional convention. Third is by a people's initiative, which, as you know, requires signature of 12% of all the voters, represented by 3% in each congressional district. In the case of people's initiative, only amendments are allowed, not revisions. And this can be done only once every 5 years. Okay, those are the limitations. But in the case of Congress acting or exercising constituent powers, there's no limit. It can be amendment and it can be revision. Constitutional Convention, the same. You cannot control what the Constitutional Convention will do. Now, the problem with the first method, which is by Congress, by a 3/4 vote of all its members, is whether it should be meeting separately or jointly, and if meeting jointly, whether voting separately or jointly. As it is being shaped now, it would seem to me that it is going to be voting separately and meeting separately. Because Senate is considering Senate resolution of joint RBH number 6 separately from you. You are considering RBH number 7, mirror image, separately from the Senate. And if you should approve it, 3/4 here, and Senate approves RBH 6, 3/4, that's voting separately. But the substance is the same. So it is approved. You can reconcile minor differences by a bicameral committee, and then come out with the same version, and then approve it again. This is the unified version. You can call it resolution of both houses, number 8 or number 6/7, with common version. It should be the same because it's resolution of both houses. It should not be different. But since you have different resolutions, that has to be reconciled in a bicam. But as long as you have 3/4 vote in the Senate and 3/4 vote here, there's no question. It can be considered as a proposed amendment and submitted to the COMELEC for a plebiscite. And that will fulfill the requirement of the first 3/4 vote of all its members. And if there's any question, then let someone bring it to the Supreme Court for a definitive interpretation of whether or not following what is called the standard legislative procedure is a correct method for adopting proposed amendments to the Constitution. I researched on the United States, Mr. Chair, And when they amend or propose amendments to the U.S. Constitution, they do it by joint resolution using the standard legislative method. So they pass it like they pass an ordinary law. Pass in the Senate of the U.S., pass in the two-thirds vote, two-thirds sa kanila. Pass in the U.S. House of Representatives, two-thirds vote. And then for ratification, it is sent to the different legislatures of the 50 or more members of the United States of America. So the standard legislative process is what they follow. The standard legislative process is what is recommended by Father Bernas when he appeared on this matter. He said, you can do it like you're doing ordinary legislation. Pass it through 3 readings and a BICAM, provided you have 3/4 vote for both in the House and the Senate. And it has to be recorded so that we know it's really 3/4, no? Not by raising the hands, then you don't know whether or not 18 in the Senate raised their hands, or in your case, 3/4 raised their hands. So it has to be not Bibobotsi, but nominal voting. Nominal voting. So to be sure that the numbers are fulfilled. And I hope that with this, finally, we can amend the Constitution so that it will be responsive to the fast-changing economic conditions of the day. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Floor leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recognize Dr. Adora Navarro, Senior Research Fellow of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, to share her thoughts about the RBH7.
The Chair would like to recognize Dr. Adora Navarro, Senior Research Fellow, Philippine Institute for Development Studies. Please proceed with your opening statement.
Good afternoon, honorable members of the House of Representatives, fellow resource persons, and other stakeholders. I am a senior fellow at the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, a government-owned think tank, and my research areas are in energy and other infrastructure sectors. Let me preface my position statement that in the PIDS, the views and opinions expressed by PIDS fellows are theirs alone and do not necessarily represent the stand of the PIDS as an institution. Okay. It has been well established in the economics literature, for example, Lungani and Razin 2001 of the International Monetary Fund, that foreign direct investments, or FDI, to developing countries bring economic gains through the following processes. First, by allowing the transfer of technology to host countries, particularly technology transfers that cannot be achieved through mere trade in goods and services. Next, by making available to the host country's human resources the training, business operation techniques, and business ethics that foreign direct investments bring in, and thereby contributing to domestic human capital development. And lastly, by generating tax revenues for the host country in the form of corporate income taxes and higher revenue tax base due to larger economic activities. It is for these same reasons that the Philippines needs FDI. If we are to focus specifically on liberalizing restrictions to FDI, we can also find country cases that show positive impacts of FDI entry liberalization. A famous case is that of China, as studied in Chen 2018. Chen presented an overview of the liberalization of FDI in China since 1978 and covered policies on contractual joint ventures, equity joint ventures, wholly foreign-owned enterprises, land use rights for foreign firms, mergers with and acquisition of domestic enterprises by foreign investors, unifying tax rates for both domestic and foreign enterprises, and many others. Citing previous studies, Chen also enumerated the ways in which FDI impacted China's economic growth. Namely, FDI increased total capital formation in China, FDI supported China's growth through diffusion of knowledge and ideas, and FDI complemented rather than crowded out domestic investment. Surely, there are other factors that can influence how the owners of foreign capital view the attractiveness of a country as an investment destination, such as the rule of law in the country or the effectiveness of the legal and judicial frameworks, the quality of infrastructure, the availability and affordability of domestic materials and labor if links to domestic industries are needed, and the level of ease of dealing with subnational or local government level institutions if subnational links are needed. But reforms in all these aspects can be pursued while liberalizing the entry of foreign capital. Put differently, foreign capital entry liberalization is a reform that is not sufficient on its own. This is how previous PIDS studies on the determinants of FDI should be interpreted. It came to my attention that there are a few stakeholders who object to amending the economic provisions of the 1987 Philippine Constitution using old PIDS studies, particularly the studies by former PIDS President Mario Lamberte, now retired, and former PIDS Senior Fellow Rafaelita Aldaba, now a DTI Undersecretary, to bolster their argument against amending the economic provisions. But these previous studies do not invalidate the basic logic that when a country restricts the entry of foreign investments, the foreign investments will be discouraged from entering. What these studies pointed out instead are that other determinants of FDI matter too. In the case of Lamberte's 1993 study, historical data from 1970 to 1989 show that the import liberalization policy had not been enough and that it should have been accompanied by appropriate macroeconomic policies, including exchange rate policy, because the peso was overvalued at the time. In the case of Aldaba's 1994 study, her result, that the effective protection rate for imports was positively associated with total FDI, highlighted the practice of foreign firms in the past to set up affiliates in the Philippines to serve the domestic market. That was in turn protected by high import barriers. She pointed out that the Philippines at the time lacked FDI that are geared toward exports. She also highlighted adequate infrastructure and real peso depreciation as other determinants of FDI. I believe that an incremental approach to liberalization can be adopted by amending the economic provisions in the 1987 Constitution, and specifically by inserting the phrase, "unless otherwise provided by law," as proposed in the resolutions of both houses number 7. This does not mean immediate 100% liberalization that certain stakeholders fear. This means that requiring legislation for liberalization of FDI entry in certain sectors will entail deep scrutiny of each sector and will mean that prioritization will have to be employed by Congress. There will have to be an investigation first of which sectors urgently need a liberalization law, and then the priority sectors have to be the first to be liberalized. The incremental approach can also take into consideration the safeguards that will allay the concerns of stakeholders. This is because there are various factors that can be designed in a legislation relaxing foreign equity restrictions, such as capital requirement, specific technology transfers, equal treatment provisions or reciprocity requirements, and other requirements. History can also be our guide in deciding which sectors to liberalize first and on what terms. This is because lessons from the history of relaxing barriers to entry of foreign firms can already be gleaned from our economic sectors which have already been liberalized, such as the financial services sector and the electric power industry sector. The incremental approach I described is also in keeping with the path that the country has been taking with respect to allowing the entry of foreign investments, as shown by the successive relaxation of foreign equity restrictions through Republic Act or RA 7042 or the Foreign Investments Act passed in 1991, RA 1641 on banking liberalization in 2014, RA 8762 on retail trade liberalization in 2021, RA 11647 amending the Foreign Investments Act in 2022, and most recently, RA 11659 amending the Public Services Act. These successive legislations are evidences of the country's incremental approach, and I believe we must stay the course. Indeed, it can be argued that FDI has been slow in coming despite these legislations. But let me offer a concept that can help stakeholders appreciate these legislations: the use of counterfactuals. As defined in the New Palgrave Dictionary of Economics, counterfactuals are what-ifs, thought experiments, alternatives to actual history. They imagine what would have happened to an economy if, contrary to fact, some present conditions were changed. So imagine how worse the overall FDI flows performance could have been. Imagine what would have happened to the Philippine economy if foreign capital had continued to be restricted in the sectors that were opened by those legislations. I end here, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Floor leader.
Before we call on members who would like to interpolate any of the resource persons, may we just acknowledge, may we just manifest for the record who the committee has invited as resource people to attend our deliberation. And as soon as they appear here, then we will allow them to share their thoughts in this committee. I refer to the following. Mr. Benjamin Romualdez, President of the Australia-New Zealand Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Julian Payne, President of Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Shigeru Shimoda, President, Japanese Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Yoon Chong-um, President of the Korean Chamber of Commerce, Philippines. Mr. Florian Gotain, Executive Director, European Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. Stefan Smits, President, German-Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry Incorporated. Mr. Yves Marvic Aguilos, Head of Government Affairs and Data Privacy, German-Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry Incorporated. Honorable Justice Antonio Carpio, former Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the Philippines. Attorney Nery Colmenares, our former colleague, lawyer, and as I've said, our former colleague. Professor Solita Collas Monsod, Professor Emeritus, UP School of Economics. Attorney Christian Monsod, former COMELEC Chairman and member of the 1986 Constitutional Commission at CONCOM. Attorney Maria Ana Abad, Dean, Adamson University College of Law. Most Reverend Pablo Virgilio S. David, President, Catholic Bishop Conference of the Philippines and Bishop of Caloocan. May I ask for a 1-minute suspension?
Hearing is suspended.
Mr.
Hearing is resumed.
Mr. Chairman, may we request that the Honorable Rufus Rodriguez be recognized for his interpellation.
The chair would like to recognize Representative Rufus Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr.
Please proceed
Chairman.
with your interpellation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Majority Leader. First, let me really thank our distinguished, one of the fathers of our 87th Constitution, the Honorable Justice Azcuna, for being here with us and giving us substantial and procedural comments on the RBH7. My question to our dear Justice is that years ago, I think I heard 5 years ago, you decided to propose amendments to the economic provisions of the Constitution. Is that correct, Justice Azcuna?
May I have the question again, sir?
Yeah, you stated that 5 years ago you proposed amendments to the economic provisions of the Constitution. You proposed economic amendments.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I was the one who proposed to Speaker Belmonte the possible amendment of the Constitution by adding the words unless otherwise provided by law.
Thank you, Justice. And in that particular proposal, which Speaker Feliciano Belmonte accepted, that became resolution of both houses number 1. Of course, you were invited. I was there during the hearings for RBH number 1 of Speaker Belmonte, correct?
I think that's correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Now, here we have, Mr. Chairman, this particular proposed resolution of Speaker Belmonte, which were supported by no less than 20 other members of the Congress, of the House, this was adopted on second reading. This is what we call resolution of both houses. And can you confirm, Honorable Justice, that what you suggested to Speaker Belmonte and what was approved by the committee on second reading during the 16th Congress, you propose that there will be no less than 8 provisions to be amended in the Constitution.
As I recall, Mr. Chair, it was more than 3.
Yes, it was 8. Yeah.
Yes, I don't recall the number, but almost all of the restrictions were proposed to be changeable by legislation.
Thank you, Justice, because the 3 that you proposed, which were adopted in RBH 1, includes public utility, includes education and advertising. It is now part of RBH 7. However, Justice, in this particular RBH 7, there is no mention for amendment of the very important exploration, exploitation of natural resources, 60/40. Did you also not propose that to the Speaker as the first proposal?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The present proposal is limited to articles on education and public utilities and advertising.
In this approved resolution of the Speaker Belmonte, following your advice, it includes the amendment on the Section 2 of Article 12 of the economy on the lifting the 60/40 for exploration, development of natural resources. You also proposed, and this was approved by the House then, and reiterated in the 17th Congress under Chairman Pido Garbin. All of this were also reiterated, except land. But in your proposal, it included land. And so then you also included land and also the lease under Article 3 of Section 3, Article 12, you included also, unless others provided by law, the leasehold that shall not exceed 25 years and only 1,000 hectares. You said, we lift it so that we can have more investments. Do you confirm that, Justice?
As I recall, Mr. Chair, Speaker Belmonte added to what I had proposed, so it's not completely the same.
Okay.
There were some provisions that he added. I don't recall which one, but his proposal covered more provisions than I had originally recommended to him.
Thank you, Justice. So my question now is this. RBH7 intends to open the Philippine gates for more foreign investment. When you open a gate, should it only be slightly open, halfway open, or we open the entire country and all the investments to foreign investments to announce to the whole world that we are now open for business and we would like to accept all the investments from our foreign businessmen. So the question is this sufficient, these three particular provisions, to open our country? Or they will say, no, we are interested in exploitation of natural resources, which is not included in this resolution. Yes, we want to come and invest on media. It is not included. Yes, we want to invest in our lease of public lands, not only 1,000 and only 25 years, but more. And so therefore, and also land, because land was one of those that says unless provided by law, because businessmen would like to get even a small portion of land for their factories. So do you think this can be, an answer to the need of the country for more foreign investments if we're limited only to 3 amendments when there are other prohibitive limitations on foreign investments, Justice?
I submit, Mr. Chair, on the wisdom of the Senate and of the House as to the extent to which the economic provisions should be amended. I would like to point out, however, that there is another provision that should remain, and that is our economy should be effectively controlled by Filipinos, effectively controlled. I did not propose to change that, so that the framework of foreign investments allowed under this changeable legislation scheme would still be a foreign investment that is effectively controlled by Filipinos. That's why I mentioned 51-49 as an ideal proportion that you might consider, as in Spain, because of the need that we should, in my view, still put in the hands of Filipinos effectively the entire economy. Now, if you have three areas as proposed now, public utilities, education, and advertising, open to foreigners, I think even if you open it more than 49%, 51-49, it will not affect the effective control of the entire economy by the Filipinos. So it will not violate that bedrock principle. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Justice. My next question, Mr. Chairman, is to Dr. Navarro of PIDS. You stated that the Philippines needs, very emphatically, needs foreign direct investments. And you cited the case of China. 1978, Deng Xiaoping opened the first economic zones of China. Since we need foreign investments, would you say that opening only, Dr. Navarro, three sections of the Constitution, Article 12, 14, and 16, excluding the other 5 other important limitations open up, is it sufficient that we only have these three articles, not to include, therefore, the others that require lifting, because we need all the foreign investments, as you have said, because foreign investments, as I quote you, bring in many advantages which you enumerated. So are you going to say that this is enough, the three amendments, or we should be able to include the others to open our country and give the message to the world that we are open for business 100%?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chair. Aside from being an economist, I'm also, I believe I'm a student of political science, and that's why I'm pushing for an incremental approach rather than opening everything up to foreign capital. We need to take into consideration stakeholders that might be affected. Usually in the short term, there will be losers in the short term, and the political situation in the country is different from China's in at the time of Deng Xiaoping. We have more democratic space, and surely proposals that will offer to the people the opening up of almost all sectors in the economy might not succeed. We will encounter strong opposition, and if we want to succeed in opening up certain sectors of the economy, I believe the incremental approach is the more appropriate approach. Thank you.
I disagree, because the next time that we can have an amendments may take another 36 years. And that is why, Mr. Chairman, our House has already approved. It's subjected to so much debate. We approved, during the time of Speaker Belmonte in the 16th Congress, resolution of both houses number 1, and it has 8 provisions. Then the House approved in the 17th Congress with Chairman Garbin, again excluding land, but the 7 provisions were approved not only by second reading, because that is what was reached by Speaker Belmonte in the 16th Congress, but in the 17th Congress, our House approved on third and reading with 3/4 vote. And this was sent to the Senate, and it has 7 provisions. And therefore now, because they are not here anymore, some are not here yesterday, let me just give a survey of what they said yesterday, because I took the bother of writing down what they stated. First, Mr. Chairman, Secretary Balisacan of NEDA, I think NEDA is still here, stated that massive infusion of capital is needed because we have very low levels of foreign investments, meaning we cannot just have 3. We should have the entire, all the provisions that need to be lifted at the same time. Yusek Abinoha of the FA stated that we have to stimulate foreign investments. And then he said, we should include, I don't know if the FA is here, we should include exploration and development of natural resources because we have the right to bank. It is sitting on the largest oil and gas deposit, and we need foreign investors to be able to explore and to develop our gas and oil supplies in the West Philippine Sea. Asek Vivero of DTI said, this is now a global economic situation. And he said, let's also include media. Media will develop to be able to have changes so that we will have a reach of all international happenings. Then we have Mr. Bernardo, director of the BSP. He said we should remove these restrictions. These are not responsive to the changing times, and therefore we should enlarge our trade and investment by having enabling investment climate to all who would wish to come here, because we need investments. Next, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, Toti Chitkamko, the President, he stated that we have to scrap all of these provisions limiting and prohibiting investments, all, because what we need is flexibility, and the House and the Senate will do this. Then we go to Sunny Africa. Here, this is the contrary view. Sunny Africa says, he was the only one yesterday against it. Sunny Africa says, it is unnecessary, counterproductive, and distracts from real development. I disagree with Mr. Africa. Then Dr. Fabella, he said, it's the investment That is what is needed. The title of his paper, which he was on Zoom, is It's the Investment. You know why? Because the Philippines has one of the lowest savings of the population in the entire ASEAN. 22% only. And we have the lowest also, the saving rate is lowest, and also with the lowest foreign investments at 22.4%. And so he's for opening up. Then he stated the Piatco case. The Piatco would not have happened if not for the Constitution. Piatco was ordered by the Supreme Court to pay 25 billion. And at the time, the publicity was, beware the Philippines, you investors. Then we have Dr. Santa Maria, also the SP. In other words, all of our guests yesterday, except Sunny Africa, said, let us open the economy. And they are not only for 3 amendments, but therefore for all. And so therefore, at this point, since my time has expired, I would propose, therefore, that our amendment be, in the proper time, it should be 2 sentences. It will be called the First Amendment to the 1987 Constitution. And what will it say, Mr. Chairman? It will now read, all prohibitions and limitations on foreign investments in the 1987 Philippine Constitution are hereby lifted and repealed, period. Congress shall enact legislation to regulate foreign investments in the Philippines. That is the kind of amendment that this country needs, Mr. Chairman. Of course, the Senate has that, but we in the BICAM should be able to convince our Senate counterparts that we cannot give piecemeal only 3 out of 8 important restrictions. And this First Amendment will therefore echo the amendments of the United States. First Amendment is to have no law to establish religion, and everybody takes the Fifth because there'll be no self-incrimination under the Fifth Amendment of the United States. The U.S. already has 27 amendments. The last one is about salary of senators and congressmen that they cannot take effect unless an intervening election for House of Representatives are done. And in the United States, their term is 2 years for the congressmen. Senators, 6 years. So we are better, but we do not think about political amendments as stated by Justice Azcuna. We will not discuss that. Only economic. Let us open our country, make sure that there will be employment for people, more job opportunities all over the Philippines, like Cagayan de Oro, the city of golden friendship. We will be able to receive investors, and there'll be work, and then they will pay taxes to finance the social programs of the government. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll go to the second round because I still have many other comments to say. Thank you, Justice Azcuna. Thank you, Dr. Navarro. Thank you, my dear colleagues.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Floor Leader,
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Lagman.
I think I have not consumed my 10 minutes yesterday, and I would like to ask some more questions.
Floor Leader, I think the Floor Leader has a list. Do we go back
yes,
to
Speaker.
Representative Lagman?
But there are other members who have already listed. Perhaps after we have, we will give him the second round, but after we have already...
Anyway, Representative Lagman, I'll give you a fresh 10 minutes later. Full 10 minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
Now?
I am still in my first round because I have not finished my 10 minutes.
Okay.
Meron ba siya 10 minutes? Huh? How many minutes?
In which case, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Floor Leader.
to accommodate the distinguished gentleman from Albay, I move that we recognize the distinguished gentleman for his interpellation.
Thank
The
you.
Chair would like to recognize Representative Lagman. You have the floor.
Thank you. Let me first direct my question to Dr. Navarro. Thank you for giving us your inputs, but I have some questions for clarification. You mentioned that the number 3 effect of foreign investment is the generation of tax revenues. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
But you would recall that we have been trying to induce the entry of foreign direct investments by giving them tax holidays, non-tax exemptions, and other forms of exemptions, like what CREATE did. And we are aware that under CREATE, the government lost billions of revenues because we tried to attract foreign investors by giving them tax exemptions and tax benefits. Is the doctor aware of that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. So in other words, it did not actually result to the generation of tax revenues. My next question is, have there been studies and consultations to find out how much is the extent or latitude or ratio that we should give to foreign investors in the ownership of utilities, education, and the other form of
Advertising.
advertising? Are there recent empirical studies?
Can I answer now?
Yes,
Your
please.
Honor? Okay. Thank you for your questions. On the second question, as far as I know, at the PIDS, we do not have studies specifically pointing to that specific question on how much should we relax the foreign equity restrictions. I don't know about other institutions, whether they have already came up with those studies. But if we are to look at the ongoing debate, there are proponents of relaxing restrictions saying that the fact that the investors are investing in our, foreign investors are investing in our public utilities up to the limit allowed by the Constitution, meaning they're maximizing what is allowed by law, by the Constitution. That already attests to the fact that they're interested to invest in our public utilities. And on your first argument on the tax impacts of FDI, I believe it's still too early to say that there will be no net gain in terms of tax impacts. The CREATE law is trying to include in the, is trying to implement an incentives-based mechanism for attracting foreign direct investments. And I believe that we should give it more time. And besides, as I argued earlier, there are other determinants of FDI inflows, and we should continue improving those factors, the investment climate, the rule of law, the ease of doing business, especially when it comes to the subnational level procedures. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. First, there is now a bill which is known as Create More. It is creating more incentives, and there will be more revenues which we are going to lose. Now, with respect to the empirical studies, I am informed there is no concrete empirical studies on how much we should give in proportion to Filipino capital to foreign investors. I think we should first do that so that we cannot just say subject to, unless otherwise provided by law, that would be putting our people and the investors in suspended animation because they have to wait for contingent legislation. Most probably we should first conduct these studies so that we are not going to place the cart before the horse. Now, with respect to the other determinants, it's good you mentioned that because you must be aware of the determinants proposed by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. And there are 6 determinants, not including the revision or amendment of economic provisions in the Constitution. One is ease of doing business. 2, reduction or elimination of official corruption. 3, reliability of government policies. 4, infrastructure support to investment. 5, more speedy internet speed. And 6, lower costs of electricity. These are the other determinants where the Philippines, unfortunately, is falling below all other countries. So before we even try to amend the nationalistic provisions in our Constitution, we should first address these empirical determinants in the inflow of foreign direct investments. Would you agree?
What I will agree on is the importance of those determinants, but on whether we should pursue the improvements of those first before tackling the amendments to the economic provisions, I would like to disagree because I believe that we can do those things simultaneously. We can do those reforms simultaneously. As a policy researcher, I'm doing my part on researching those other determinants, particularly in energy and other infrastructure sectors. And it's good that you mentioned that we need studies, and that is part of the incremental approach that I described earlier, no? For Congress to conduct or engage others to conduct studies that will support the proposed amendments,
Okay.
and sector by sector.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that before we open the floodgates to foreign investments, we should first comply with the prescription of the OECD. Because once we open up without complying with this, they are not going to come in. They are not going to come in because we fail in comparison with other countries. Thank you again, Dr. Navarro. My next series of questions will be for Justice Adolf Azcuna. When we say, quote, otherwise provided by law, in effect, we're saying that Congress, by mere legislation, can effect amendments to the Constitution, more particularly on the economic provisions under Articles 12, 14, and 16. Is that correct?
I didn't get it, I'm sorry.
Okay. Justice Azcuna, when the resolutions say that unless otherwise provided by law, the effect is that the Congress, by mere legislation, can effect amendments or even revisions to the economic provisions under Article 12, 14, and 16 of the Constitution. Is that correct?
The effect of the proposed amendment, unless otherwise provided by law, is to make that particular restriction changeable by legislation, Mr. Chair. And unless there is legislation that changes it, it remains. It will remain as it is now in the Constitution. It merely becomes changeable by legislation.
Now, when it becomes changeable by legislation,
That's correct.
the effectivity of such legislation will not anymore be submitted to the people in a plebiscite, because it is only a law. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor, it will be up to Congress to provide the safeguards in allowing foreign investments in that area.
Now, since the change in the economic provisions will be by legislation, the enrolled bill will not be submitted to the people, but will be submitted to the President for his approval or veto. Is that correct?
The proposals will be subject to approval, of course, in a plebiscite, yes.
So, even if it is by mere legislation, the amendment will be submitted not to the President because it is a law, but it will be submitted to a plebiscite.
Yes, Your Honor, the proposed amendment, unless otherwise provided by law, inserted in the strategic places in the Constitution, will have to be approved as an amendment to the Constitution through a plebiscite.
Okay, thank you. Now, in that case, are we providing Justice Azcuna a fourth mode of amending the Constitution, which is by ordinary statute or legislation?
The proposed amendment will have to be approved by 3/4 vote of the Senate and 3/4 vote of the House. But once approved and presented in a plebiscite and approved in the plebiscite, the provision becomes changeable by ordinary legislation, Your Honor.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, Honorable Lagman, just a point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, what's the point of order of
With
Congressman
due
Defensor?
respect to the Honorable Lagman propounding questions, I believe there is a miscommunication with respect to what is to be signed or approved by the President and what is to be approved by plebiscite. The question by the Honorable Lagman is, the phrase, unless otherwise provided by law, will be submitted to the people in a plebiscite for their approval. And once that is approved, there will be a law to implement or to put in whatever percentage that Congress deems appropriate for a specific industry. And that bill, Mr. Chairman, will be submitted to the President for his approval. Is my understanding correct so that the Justice can answer appropriately? Honorable Lagman?
Well, you have said it the way I express it, and it will be dependent on the Justice to answer my question.
Mr. Chairman, may
And
I
it
just
appears
repeat?
that the proposed amendment, unless otherwise provided by law, will be through the traditional mode of constituent assembly, and this will be submitted to the people.
Correct.
Correct. And once this is approved, Congress now can enact ordinary legislation to amend or revise the economic provisions. Is that correct?
Correct, Mr.
That's
Speaker.
correct. That is precisely what I was saying. So, in other words,
So if it's
once
okay-
Congress amends the economic provisions of the Constitution by legislation, there is no need for this to go to the people for approval in a plebiscite because it is by mere legislation. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. It's an ordinary legislation. Now, it would seem that it is irregular for an ordinary legislation to amend a provision of the Constitution. But this is because the Constitution itself allows it. In fact, there is already an existing provision which says that practice of the professions shall be limited to Filipinos except in cases provided by law. That's in the present Constitution. So right now, you can pass a law amending the Constitution because it says you may do so. It's not prohibited. So when you pass a legislation later on providing for foreign investments and changing the proportions in the Constitution, it's because the Constitution itself allows you, Mr. Chair.
Well, in the present Constitution, there are more than 10 provisions wherein it says, unless otherwise provided by law or as defined by law. But these are not amendatory to the Constitution. These are implementing the provisions of the Constitution. This is different in the resolutions because in the resolutions, unless otherwise provided by law, would be amending or revising the Constitution. That is the difference. That is why I am asking whether we are proposing a fourth mode of amending the Constitution, which is by mere legislation.
As I said, Mr. Chair, there is an existing provision in the Constitution now which says that the practice of all professions shall be limited to Filipinos except in cases provided by law. That's an existing provision. So that's the model. So when we say that advertising should be owned by 70% Filipinos, unless otherwise provided by law, that is allowing Congress to adopt an ordinary law, changing that percentage.
That goes to my question, whether when we say unless otherwise provided by law, we are proposing for a fourth mode of amending the Constitution, which is by legislation.
Yes, once allowed by the Constitution through approval of this amendment, it will be changeable by legislation. And the legislation will have to be signed by the President, like any legislation. So it's just an ordinary law.
Yeah. So, in other words, are the resolutions 6 and 7 amending Article 17 of the Constitution by including a new mode of amending or revising the Constitution, which is by mere legislation?
Yes, Your Honor. The effect and import of this proposed amendment is really to make the provision changeable by legislation. And there's nothing wrong with that because there is already an existing provision in the Constitution that has a similar import. It says all professions are limited to Filipinos except in cases provided by law.
Consequently, Justice Azcuna, these resolutions should also reflect that they are amending Article 17 of the Constitution on the amendment or revision of the Constitution.
Yes, the Article 17, in fact, is called, Mr. Chairman, the Article of Sovereignty. There are three parts of the Constitution. The Article of liberty, Constitution of Liberty, which is the Bill of Rights, Constitution of Governance, which are the structure of government, and the most important part of the Constitution is the Constitution of Sovereignty, which is Article 17, which provides for how the Constitution may be changed, amended, or revised. And this is, in your case, you have the power, Congress exercising constituent powers can propose amendments or revisions to the Constitution. There is no limit to the kind of amendments or revisions you can propose. So you can propose unless otherwise provided by law. There's nothing wrong with that.
Thank
But
you.
that has to be approved in a plebiscite.
Thank you, Justice Azcuna. My time is up, and I will reserve a second round.
Thank you very much, Congressman Lagman. Majority Leader.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes,
move that we
Majority Leader.
recognize the honorable gentleman from APEC Party List, the Honorable Sergio Daguo.
Yes, Congressman Dagok, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Majority Leader. Good afternoon, everyone, especially to our resource persons. Actually, some of my supposed to be questions were already asked. However, I would just like to reiterate some of it because I wanted a specific. Mr. Chair, if we have Nida here or maybe Madam Nida, do we, yesterday's hearing, no, I have heard that almost all of our resource persons, no, is in favor of amending these particular provisions of our Constitution na paluwagan natin because we need foreign direct investments. Now, have we already conducted a concrete study that will support our claim that foreign direct investments have really direct impact on employment, revenues, and other economic indicators?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, you may proceed.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Actually, NEDA is supportive of relaxing these restrictions on the economic restrictions in the Constitution. In particular, because we want to have additional tools in order to have what we want, which is a prosperous, inclusive, and resilient Philippines. And we think that it can be through 4 tools. If we can have 4 tools. One is if we can have more FDIs and the right kind of FDIs as well. And this one will also be possible if we can have international education, if we can have international advertising, and then the modern utilities. So we have looked at other studies because in order to determine if FDI really affects growth and incomes and growth.
That is the question, Mr. Chair, that I'm asking.
Yes.
Mayroon kayong study?
We have looked at empirical studies po.
Can you share with this representation, ano yung conclusion doon sa study? For example, to be specific, what is the ratio of FDI to our employment? Halimbawa, we have 1,000 employees in our labor sector. Ilan po doon yung na-employ because of foreign direct investment? That is only for example. And other economic indicators, can you educate this representation? The correlation between the foreign direct investment and the different economic indicators, including tax revenues.
Yung pong sa foreign investment and tax revenues, actually, even if we provide the tax incentives, in the long run, Kasi meron naman pong limit yung tax incentives natin eh. It's time-bound. And then, so in the long run, we will be generating those revenues. Number two, we are, even as we are providing the corporate tax incentives, we are also able to collect income taxes from the employment generated po.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chair, I understand that. What I'm asking, with all due respect to our resource person, is the result of your study. For example, in terms of percentage, no, doon sa labor force natin, anong porsyento po yung na-employ because of foreign direct investment? For example, doon sa tax revenues natin, anong porsyento po yung collection natin sa tax revenues na directly related to foreign direct investment? Yan po yung tinatanong ko, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if you will allow me to have, to just submit that report in writing, kukunin po namin yung data from the Department of Finance for the tax revenues po. And then for the employment, kailangan namin tingnan yung data on Philippine business industry.
Madam Chair, no, that's why I am asking those statistical questions because we need that para magiging tama po yung magiging desisyon natin sa botohan kung panig ka ba o ayaw mo sa pinag-usapan ngayon. Kasi in layman's understanding, no, it is my point of view that the very objective of having this exercise, no, ay paluwagan natin yung restrictions doon sa mga economic provisions ng ating konstitusyon. At gagastos po tayo doon dahil magkakandak po tayo ng plebiscite. Gagastos po tayo. Ang pinag-usapan dito, yung karampatang gastos ba natin ay may katumbas na benepisyo para sa ating bayan. Kaya po gusto ko pong malaman, kasi palagi na lang nating sinasabi, generally, to generate employment, to generate taxes, etc., wala naman po pala tayong concrete na pag-aaral. O kung mayroon man, kindly educate this representation. Kasi kailangan po natin yon. Pangalawa, Madam Chair, no? It has been an established fact. It has been stated, reiterated, no, by most of our resource persons yesterday that it is not only the restrictive economic provisions of our Constitution that hinders the entry of foreign direct investments. There are still a lot, no, of reasons, no. As a matter of fact, it has been reiterated by the Honorable Edsel Lagman na that includes cost of electricity and others, no. Mayroon po bang pag-aaral ang NIDA kung ano po ba talaga yung priority natin? For example, we will be successful in amending these three allegedly restrictive provisions of our Constitution as far as foreign direct investment is concerned. Alin po ba doon sa mga sektor na yon ang ating priority? Dapat po kasi nakalatag na yung mga study na yon. Kasi there are interrelated with each other. Otherwise, pupunta po tayo sa issue of chicken and egg. Halimbawa, sasabihin natin, walang foreign direct investment dahil mahal ang kuryente. Ay, mayroon po ba tayong pag-aaral na dapat ang una nating hikayatin ay sa sektor ng enerhiya na investment? Dapat po mayroon tayo dyan, NIDA, para there are different sectors in our economy. Alin po ba doon ang dapat una nating pasukan kung mawala na yung mga restrictive provisions na to para luluwag yung other. Halimbawa, tanggap tayo sa manufacturing. Hindi sila papasok dahil mahal nga yung presyo ng kuryente. Ano bang dahilan? Bakit nagmahal yung presyo ng kuryente? So, dapat mayroon na tayong list of prioritized sector na pag niluwagan to, ito yung una ninyong pasukan para ma-resolve yung other issues hindering yung entry of foreign direct investment. Sana po magawa natin yan, no? Kung hindi pa natin nagawa. Pero kung nagawa na, kindly share that to this chamber para biruin mo, lalagyan natin unless otherwise provided by law. Ngayon, this chamber will enact laws, no? Enabling laws to implement that particular provision of the Constitution. Dapat we will be guided accordingly by your study. Kung anong sektor, yung una naming batas na ipasa halimbawa, dapat sa sektor muna kayo ng enerhiya para bababa, gaganda yung reliability, bababa yung presyo, para papasok yung direct investment from the manufacturing and other sector. Yan po yung pananaw ng representasyon na to, Madam Chair. Now, going back to the proposal and recommendation of Chief Justice Pono yesterday, according to him, instead of having this proposal, unless otherwise provided by law, ay i-delete na lang natin yung mga restrictive provisions para hindi siya magiging subject to other interpretation. So, may I respectfully ask the Honorable Justice Azcuna, ano po yung magiging legal implication kung halimbawa susundin natin yung recommendation ni Chief Justice Puno na i-delete na lang natin yung mga tatlong restrictive provisions. So wala na siya. So ano po yung magiging legal implication? May kapangyarihan pa po ba ang Kongreso na mag-enact that enact clause na that will set, for example, the limit of the ratio on investment, foreign direct investment, Filipino and foreign? If i-delete na lang natin, wala na yung provision ngayon, nalalagyan lang natin ng unless otherwise provided by law.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is, of course, an alternative. The problem with that, to my mind, Madam Chair, is that it will leave a hiatus in the framework of foreign investments because we deleted the proportion of foreign investments that may be allowed. So that means it can be any amount. So we are not prohibiting, we're not limiting at all the entry of foreign investment. That may be dangerous, Madam Chair. We should regulate the entry of foreign investment rather than be totally silent about it. There should be a framework for the entry of foreign investment, and the framework that we have now should be maintained in the Constitution, only it should be adjustable by legislation. In answer to I did not get the question of the gentleman from Albay. If we provide for unless otherwise provided by law, and a law is later on passed, it does not mean that the law can amend the Constitution. It's simply operationalizing what the Constitution has already allowed, that a a law may be passed to provide a different arrangement that is pursuant to a power given in the Constitution itself. So I believe it's better than just deleting, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Justice. Madam Chair, may I ask again, the Honorable Justice Azcuna, am I correct in interpreting, again, this is somewhat a reiteration of my question a while ago. Pagka i-delete lang natin yon automatically, wala na tong unless otherwise provided by law, am I correct with my interpretation na this Congress cannot anymore enact laws that will limit the ratio of ownership?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I believe that there is a need to provide Congress the ability to define the extent of the foreign investment that may enter these critical areas of our industry. Otherwise, the economy may be overwhelmed by foreign investment. The foreign investment should really be regulated. I do not believe that a free and open system for foreign investment is practiced by any country. Other countries have restrictions, only it's found in legislation. It's not found in their constitution, so that it's adjustable, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Justice. Thank you, other resource persons. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Floor Leader. Madam Speaker, I move that to recognize the gentleman from the 2nd District of Parañaque City, the Honorable Gustavo Tambunting.
The Honorable Gus Tambunting is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, distinguished colleagues, resource persons. I prepared 7 questions. The first would be somehow related to the Honorable Dago's question earlier. Can you please specify which public utility sectors will be mostly affected by this amendment? And please elaborate the reasons why these sectors are targeted. Yes, maybe our NEDA representative,
Yes, please
Yusek,
proceed.
Rosemary can answer this.
Madam Chair? Yeah, yes, actually, if I can also mention as well, that with respect to looking at the impact of FDI on growth and employment, we really need to look at multi-country studies. We cannot be simply confined to our country study, because then it will be a very constrained optimum. Now, with respect to your question on what are the sectors, then we really are looking at being able to attract more of the strategic FDI and more of the high-quality FDI. For instance, with respect to manufacturing, we only have the low value-added manufacturing here in the Philippines. We do not have any multinational company that does research here in the Philippines, and it's really because we do not have a pool of researchers, of scientists. So we need to have that massive pool of R&D, and we think that that is what the international education can bring us. Now, with respect to international advertising, the reason why we want this liberalized as well is so that we can benefit from what we call the smile curve, where you have high value added from the design stage of this of the manufacturing process or any production process, and then at the post-production stage, meaning advertising, meaning post-marketing studies. And this is also what international advertising can do to us. can benefit, because we have seen that advertising as an industry has also evolved over the years. Now it's gotten into more of digital advertising. And so, again, if we bring in the international advertisers, that will also provide ample exposure to our creative sector, which right now number about 1.2 million who are working in the creative sector. So if you can provide them more of these opportunities, then that would be good as well. Now, for the modern utilities, that is also actually also paramount on our list. As we know, we need to bring down the cost of power. We also need to make it stable and then reliable. And we also need high-speed telecoms. And these are actually the things that we would like to bring in. And we think that this is also what can bring in the other strategic FDI into the country. Mr. Chair, Madam Chair.
How about water? Water.
For water, I think right now, the position of the NEDA is we do have the issue of water rights in the Philippines, and that is still, something of a resource that I think if you allow for this, then it could lead to other issues.
So that's not a priority.
Not for us, not for us. But we do have other reform agenda with respect to the water sector.
How will the government enhance its regulatory framework to oversee foreign entities in our public utilities and to ensure compliance of our local laws and regulations?
Yeah, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
How will the government enhance, as stated by Justice Azcuna earlier, that we need to enhance our regulatory framework to oversee the entry of the foreigners in our public utilities? The question is, how do we plan to do it? Ensure that our local laws are complied with.
Madam Chair, actually, it's really not. It's actually already embedded in the Philippine Development Plan. In fact, this chamber has already passed the ease of doing business, efficient government service delivery. And ARTA has been reporting on its accomplishments, and we have been making, advances, progress with respect to the regulatory efficiency. For the part of the NEDA, at the start, we have actually advocated for the institutionalization of a regulatory impact assessment for existing regulations and especially new regulations that will be imposed. And then recently as well, we have also been advocating for the institutionalization of a competition impact assessment, just to make sure that the regulations are actually competition neutral. So if you have all these things, then that's really one way to improve the regulatory environment.
What impact will the amendment have on local employment? As stated by Ibon Foundation yesterday, his position is it will have no impact, as his data would show, with the previous foreign investments, since it was all profit-taking anyway. So hindi naman daw talaga nagdadagdag yan sa pagbibigay ng trabaho sa ating mga kababayan. Yun ang posisyon niya kahapon. Do you agree? And what steps will we take to safeguard the rights of Filipino workers?
Madam Chair, with respect to the second question, I think
Yes.
we already have our laws that protect the rights of the workers. And in fact, I would even say that very selective yung naging statistics now, because if you look at the statistics, for instance, in Calabar Zone, where we have the eco zones, where
Correct.
we have many of the FDIs, this is really the where most of the employment is. And of course, it's also found in the sectors that we have opened up. So let's say in manufacturing. But the problem with our manufacturing is, again, it has been limited to the low value-added manufacturing. And we think that what we need to do is really to bring in more of the high-value FDI, but that would require having a substantial pool of scientists, R&D specialists.
What are the projected long-term economic implications of this amendment to the national economy, including GDP growth, foreign exchange earnings, and fiscal balance?
Yes, thank you. We can only surmise, the situation that what has happened, for instance, in Malaysia, in Singapore especially. For instance, I was just looking at the education sector in Malaysia. They already have many universities that have actually set up campuses in Malaysia. And so you have Swinburne University, you have the Reading University of Reading, which is actually a highly rated business school. You have Monash University. They actually are able to attract about 170,000 foreign students. In comparison, the Philippines, we only host about 36,000 as of 2022, 36,000 students. If for this sector alone, if we can triple it, let's say make it to 100,000, then our projections show that this will actually add 0.2 percentage points to our GDP growth. And of course, that's not yet considering the externality effects of having these top-rated, reputable schools in the country. You can just imagine the international collaboration, the R&D, the innovation ecosystem that this will actually redound to. So the next thing that we will have to do is what if all this are opened up? Then we will get back to you with the numbers. But for sure, it will be. We're hoping that at the very least we'll get will be accelerating actually to the level of let's say Malaysia. What is Malaysia now? Thank you.
How will this amendment ensure that consumer interests are prioritized, particularly in terms of pricing, quality of service, and dispute resolution in foreign-operated utilities?
Sure. With respect to the pricing and the quality of service, actually with more FDI, you bring in also more competition.
Correct.
And if there's more competition, there will be greater innovation, and that is actually, it will actually be to the interest of the consumer as well. Now, with respect to, in the area of utilities, I think we have not yet really, forgotten our regulatory agencies. They're still there. It's just that what we want is for them to always make sure that there's regulatory efficiency, the regulations are there for a reason, and that it doesn't impose undue burden on their constituency.
Which leads to my next question. Could the entry of foreign players potentially lead to monopolistic practices in our public utility sector? And what regulatory measures are proposed to encourage healthy competition?
Okay, Madam Chair. Actually, with greater innovation, the character of these public utilities can really evolve. So let's just take the example of, a concrete example would be the telecoms industry. It used to be a natural monopoly, but with innovation, then we found out that it doesn't have to be a natural monopoly, and therefore we now have many players, and it actually led to better services and even affordable services at that. it's still not the best. We still need to bring in more competition there because I think that's still the way to go. So that's one, greater innovation, and that will also come with, if you bring in the competition. But of course, there's also there's still the function of the regulatory authority, making sure that the consumer welfare is, that is really foremost in the interest of the regulator.
Last but not least, alam po ninyo, meron po kami mga batas, Tatak Pinoy, at binibigyan po natin ng kahalagaan ang ating mga produkto, ang ating kultura, ang pagpapreserve po nito. With these amendments, what steps will be taken to ensure that foreign-owned utilities respect and integrate our local culture and our social norms in their operations?
Yes, thank you. Actually, with respect to Tatak Pinoy, the way that we're looking at this is really increasing the competitiveness of Filipino-made products. And we think that this can be done if you really have a very, very dynamic innovation ecosystem. And again, goes back to being able to, co-create, being able to co-collaborate with other innovation actors. And so I think if Philippine-made products can be very innovative, competitive, again, like I said, you bring in also the very good creative sectors to make it, to increase its commercial appeal, then we don't even need to worry about our products, the culture, which of course will be embedded in these products, and that it will be forgotten. So I think we still need to have a niche in order to have, in order to be very competitive. And I think in the case of the Philippines, the niche is really being able to hone our unique tradition, our unique culture.
Thank you very much, Yusek Rosemary. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Majority Leader. Thank you, distinguished colleagues. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Chair, I move that we recognize the gentleman from the 3rd District of Camarines Sur, the Honorable Gabriel Bordado, for his manifestation.
Congressman Bordado is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, after listening intently to the comments of our resource persons, particularly the erudite pronouncements made by former Chief Justice Reynato Serrano Puno, I came up with this manifestation. Mr. Chairman, admittedly, it is human nature to have the penchant to improve things which at times cost us more than the end we wish to attain. The same can be said on the proposed amendments to the economic provisions of the Constitution. Mr. Chairman, as pointed out by Speaker Martin Romualdez, the rationale behind the amendments can be summarized into 3 points: to liberalize industries, promote efficient service delivery, and foster competition. Second, to ensure that Filipino children receive the best training so as to become globally competitive. And third, to attract foreign direct investment in the advertising industry. Mr. Chairman, if those are the ends to be met by the proposed changes, the crucial question becomes, are these ends not achievable with the current economic constitutional provisions? Mr. Chairman, it is my firm belief that the answer is yes. These objectives can be attained without the arduous process of amending the Constitution. There are already mechanisms in place to arrive at the same result. On the other hand, Filipino children can still be given access to the best schools while allowing Filipinos to retain control and administration of educational institutions. It is not foreign ownership of these institutions that translate to best training and global competitiveness. Local schools can be adequately equipped and funded. Local and foreign grants and scholarships can be made accessible to Filipino children. Both can be achieved without the proposed amendments. In other words, Mr. Chairman, the end game of these amendments is within our reach with the current system. There is nothing wrong, outdated, or inadequate about the current economic provisions of the Constitution. The key is to implement, strengthen, and mainstream the existing mechanisms in place. Amending the Constitution, Mr. Chairman, requires time, effort, and resources. Time, effort, and resources that could be diverted into more pressing issues like educational budget cuts, human rights violations, and agrarian reform, to name a few, that require genuine governmental attention and action. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Floor Leader.
Mr. Chair, may I request that we recognize the Honorable Franz Castro of ACT Teachers for her interpellation.
Representative Franz Castro, you have the floor.
First of all, Mr. Chair, would like to have a clarification. So those a resource person that we have invited that are not present here because of very limited time of invitation kasi Mr. Chair, kahapon lang na-invite. In fact, nung Friday pa ako nagsulat na ito yung imbitahan. Unfortunately, si Mr. Sunny Africa lang yung dumating. So, is there any chance ulit na mapadalo po sila? Kasi may mga questions po ako sa kanila. So, yun po yung, yung clarification ko po, Mr. Chair. And even former Chief Justice Puno, Mr. Chair.
Yes, the Chair directs the Secretariat to send again the invitation to the guest that Representative Franz Castro would like to invite here.
So may we have the answer, Mr. Chair, para alam din po ng ng ating mga kasama kung ano yung mga, like for example, kung may chance pa ba na ma-invite ang representative ng CBCP, later on siguro yung doon sa yung dean ng din po ng Adamson, yung mga binanggit ko po na resource person.
A while ago, Mr. Chairman, we read for the records those who we have invited as resource speakers to attend the committee as a committee of the whole meeting. May I just inquire to whom are you referring to so I can find out if ano pangalan? May I ask for 1 minute suspension?
Hearing is suspended. Hearing is resumed. Floor leader.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
Aye.
Ay.
Floor leader.
May I move that we recognize the distinguished representative, the Honorable Franz Castro.
The Honorable Franz Castro is recognized. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the information lang po, Mr. Chair, I just would like for procedural and general principles po, tanungin ko lang po no, yung time schedule, time frame natin itong pag-discuss ng RBH7. Are we going to have it to finish before our end of the session, before March 22? So what would be the time frame of our discussion, Mr. Chair, on RBH7?
My understanding is the Committee of the Whole will meet up to next week. And hopefully, if we are able to finish by next week, Wednesday, I think, and we are able to finish for reporting out the committee report of the Committee of the Whole, then my understanding is it will be scheduled for second reading in plenary on March 11, 12, 13, which is Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And hopefully, again, hopefully, if we are able to finish and approve the same on second reading, then in compliance with our rules, copies of which will be distributed, and after 3 days from distribution, it can be scheduled for third reading.
Okay. So malinaw po, Mr. Chair, no? So before we have our recess, ay tapos na natin ito. So it would not affect in any way doon sa schedule ng Senate. Kasi this would not affect in any way doon sa schedule ng Senate. Kasi, Mr. Chair, sinasabi po sa Senate na parang before the election na mangyayari yung sa kanila, yung approval nung sa kanila. So,
I cannot answer for the Senate.
Okay.
It would depend. It would depend if on the it would depend if both of us can approve by the requisite number of votes before we declare a Lenten break. Then pwede na i-refer sa COMELEC. On the other hand, even if we are able to finish our version before the Lenten break and transmit it to the Senate, but the Senate will not act on it, then we will wait. When the Senate will be able to act on it, because as I have already stated repeatedly, since we have adopted the mode as provided for by our rules and in accordance with the Constitution, the route of considering this in the nature of considering a bill, then it has to be approved likewise. There must be a counterpart Senate version. Otherwise, kung walang Senate version like any other bill na meron tayo, pag kahit na-approve natin yun dito at walang bill sa Senate, wala, patay talaga. So, nothing will happen na kung kahit na, and can the Senate, based on their schedule and the time that they will allow it to be debated upon, to be heard upon, can very well hintayin na yung susunod na election. They can do that because for so long as walang Senate version na approving it by three-fourths vote, there will be nothing to submit to the plebiscite for the approval of our people.
okay. So thank you for the clarification, Mr. Chair. So yung proseso po natin, while we are discussing now yung RBH7 and the counterpart naman po nasa Senate, they will vote mo 3/4 of their of their members. Tayo rin po ay 3/4. So Mr. Chair, pag natapos po natin so magkakaroon ng BICAM, tama po ba?
Kung meron hong pagkakaiba, kasi ang nasasabi hong pagkakaiba lang naman doon sa resolutory, parang resolutory clause. Resolved na sa Senate kasi may nakalagay by 3/4 vote of the members voting separately. Doon lang naman ho tayo nagkakaiba eh. Wala ho tayo sa ating resolution na nakalagay na voting separately. No? Pero ang proseso ho natin ginagawa ngayon, guarantees that there will be a voting separately by the Senate dahil kasi nga para this is an ordinary bill eh. Ngayon, ako ho, ang aking suggestion lang, kesa kung halimbawa pareho naman ho tayo lahat ng nakalagay dyan, pati yung mandatory provisions, pareho, except nagkakaiba lang tayo dun sa nakalagay nila na voting separately, I think during the period of amendment, nothing prevents us. Kasi we are treating this as a bill eh. Although in the exercise of our constituent power, pwede natin ilagay doon, subject to the approval of the plenary yan, na lagay na rin natin doon, voting separately because actually we are doing the same, we are effectively voting separately para kung ma-approve natin, ito na ngayon this is a 100% mirror na noong version ng Senate at kung 100% there is no more room para magkaroon ng bicameral conference committee. Kasi what will happen is, assuming that both chamber will approve exactly the same, except yung nakalagay lang na voting separately. Ang mangyayari lang, during the BICAM, ang pag-uusapan lang natin, I-adapt nyo ba yung version ng House na walang nakalagay na voting separately? Total, nagbotohan naman talaga tayo na separately. Or i-adapt natin yung, yung version nyo na ilalagay, i-include yung version na voting separately dahil wala namang masama because we did that, di ba? We did that. Sa akin naman, para wag nang dumating do sa punto na yon, nothing prevents us during the period of amendment to amend our resolution para maisama na yung yung voting separately. So para sa pagdating ng taktang panahon, wala nang BICAM na pag-uusapan.
Yes, Mr. Chair, tinatanong ko po kasi ito dahil we are deliberating on RBH7. Sa Senate, nagde-deliberate din ng RBH7 din nila or 6. Dahil, siyempre, pag na-approve na po natin dito yung ating RBH7, Mr. Chair, magbo-vote na tayo, no? Tapos, ang tanong ko po, so yun, sinabi niyo na kanina, no? Sino yung magbubuo ng BICAM? Okay? So, for example, hindi po talaga nagkasundo. Sinabi talaga, matigas po ang Senado na voting separately. Tapos tayo naman po, the 3/4 of the Congress will vote, di ba? Sa na magkaiba talaga. So,
actually,
ano po yung bubuo ng BICAM, Mr. Chair?
The House.
Floor leader, the floor leader will respond, after which the chair will recognize Representative Rodriguez.
Actually, how
Sorry, Mr.
a bicameral conference committee members is created in the House. Di ba, sa atin naman, ang name lang ng bicameral conference committee, the majority leader, the speaker, tinitignan kung sino mga kasama dyan. The author, the chairman, etc. Member of the opposition, sinasama niya doon sa BICAM. It will be the same. Pero ano pa ho yun? Kasi kung halimbawa, sabi ko nga, kung halimbawa i-amend natin yung ating resolution na ilagay yung voting separately, na total ginagawa natin talaga, dahil wala na occasion para i-constitute ang BICAM. Kasi di ba, kino-constitute lang naman ho ang BICAM kung may pagkakaiba. Di ba? Kung pagkakaiba. Kung wala namang pagkakaiba, there is no need to constitute the BICAM.
Okay.
Representative Castro, the chair would like to recognize first Representative Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, we cannot really say that we have identical resolutions. We are still in the process of debate in this hearing because, Mr. Chairman, I believe that we should not just follow what the Senate has done on only 3 amendments. Because I heard the President in the PhilConsa, during that particular PhilConsa anniversary, the President says that we have to have all the amendments only in economic that will open our country to more investments. The President has gone all over the world inviting investors because that is what is needed by our country. And if we limit our amendments, Mr. Chairman, just because we want to fast track and have the same amendments at the Senate, then we will lose this opportunity. Because the President has invited and in meetings, as the Speaker has said, in this meeting they always say, how can we invest, for example, when there is a limitation in your Constitution? And 3 important amendments, proposed amendments, are left out by the Senate and our RBH. What are these? Article 2 of Article 14. This is on the exploitation, exploration, development of natural resources. We need to develop Rectobang and the West Philippine Sea. It is not included in what we have now, nor the Senate. We need to amend on media so that media will be here to be able to improve our dissemination of information. Third, we limit the lease of land to only 1,000 hectares. And it's only for 25 years. So that is something that should also be, lifted. And that is why to say that we are going to fast track because we only will have 3 amendments, we will be putting the cart before the horse. Let us not have discussions on that. This is a freewheeling discussion. Everybody should be able to make a proposal. Like in my case, Mr. Chairman, in our case, we will not just follow the Senate. They are only giving us lip service for only 3. And that is not what our country needs.
Mr. Chairman.
And so therefore, just to end, Mr. Chairman, I'm taking law, I'm sorry to the majority leader. That's why to me, Mr. Chairman, in the proper time, I would propose a very simple amendment, 2 sentences. 1, First Amendment to the 1987 Constitution. All prohibitions, limitations in the 1987 Constitution on foreign investment shall be repealed and lifted. Period. That's the first sentence. Second sentence, Congress, through legislation, shall enact the regulations to regulate all foreign investments. So let us not talk about, kowtowing to the Senate. No, sir. This is a supreme constitutional procedure that we're doing. That is the constitution of the whole of the House, and later on to go to plenary. So let us be open. Let us be open to have a real opening, because that is what the country needs. Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm finished. So we'll go.
Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, may I just remind the members that this is the time of the lady who is interpolating. Anyway, just a small retort to the statement of the distinguished gentleman from Cagayan de Oro City. He's correct. Nothing prevents him from proposing an amendment. Dalawang beses ho, pwede. May pagkakataon siya. During the committee hearing, before we adopt the committee report, he can propose his amendment. Kung ma-carry yun, then it will be part of the committee amendment or individual amendment. Failing that, he can go to the plenary. During the plenary, during the time of individual amendment, he can propose that amendment. Kung manalo siya, di panalo. Kung hindi mananalo, di talo. Ganun lang naman ho yun eh. Ganun lang. But any member who has a proposed amendment can do so at the proper time. But what I'm just saying is in response to the actual question of the distinguished lady, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Well,
Representative Castro, you still have time. Please proceed.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, mabuti na lang po narinig ko yung position ng ating chair ng Committee on Amendments. So yun po sana, Mr. Chair, yung itatanong natin sa ating chairman, sa ating majority floor leader about doon sa pag natapos ba natin itong deliberations ng RBH7. Mababago ba ng Committee of the Whole yung magiging decision? So magkakaroon na ng amendments. So nag-worry po ang kinatawang ito, Mr. Chair, kasi baka hindi lang yung 3 ito. Nakita naman natin yung statement ng ating chairman ng Committee on Amendments. Parang mas gusto niya, dahil gusto ni President Marcos na ibukas ang buong ekonomiya ang economic provisions. So hindi lang po dito sa 3. So maaaring maibukas din yung land ownership na yes, kasi yun po yung yung po magkakaroon po ng amendments. Sa tingin ko po, hindi malilimitahan lang dun sa 3. So paano nyo po ma-ensure kami na oppose dito sa mga amendments na ito lang yung bubuksan ninyo? Kasi pag binuksan na yung ownership of the land, binuksan na rin yung media, binuksan na rin yung iba pang lahat na ng utilidad. Kasi wala namang magbabawal sa bawat membro ng 316 member ng House of Representatives na mag-amend, 'di ba? If you are going to approve this RBH7. Di po ba? So kami, 3 lang kami na nag-oppose dyan. Kung sinabing mag-amend kami dun sa ownership, di botohan, di mas marami. So parang, ibig sabihin, paano namin mai-ensure na ito lang talaga ang magiging amendments, Mr. Chair? Magaganap din sa BICAM kung magkakaroon talaga ng, hindi maiwasan, magkakaroon talaga, Mr. Chair, ng magkakaibang provisions, di po ba? So, Yun na po yung tanong natin, Mr. Chair.
Floor leader.
Bilang sagot po, bilang sagot. Alam niyo ho, pang ilang term ko na ba to as a member of Congress? This is my 8th term. My first term was 1995, 10th Congress. Naging majority leader ako, 12th Congress, 15th Congress, 16th Congress. I was the majority leader of the 11th Congress for 6 months. Marami na akong pinagdaanan yung usapin sa Constitution. Totoo ho, yung sinasabi that there are general manner of amending the Constitution, con-as, saka con-con. Na-add nga lang yung People's Initiative in the 1987 Constitution. Wala ho ito sa 1935 Constitution, nor in the 1976 Constitution. Marami na ho na attempt ang House na tumawag ng con-con or mag-constitute tayo as a Constituent Assembly, both houses of Congress. Napapasa natin, hindi pumapasa doon sa ating counterpart. Ako ho, sa pantaha ko lang naman ho ito, no? May just suspicion. Hindi necessarily, hindi ko malaman kung totoo o hindi. The reason why we are failing to constitute a constitutional convention at yung magsama tayo as a Constituent Assembly, merong built-in suspicion na maaring mawala ang isang institusyon. Di ba? Mawala ang isang institusyon. Sabi, tatawag ka ng Constitutional Convention. Sa totoong buhay, sino ang kaya mag-elect ng mga delegado? Sa CONCON, yung mga politiko. Diba? So natatakot ngayon dyan kung sino man na baka mawala sila. Dahil iba na Iba na. Hindi na controlled ng Congress yan may sarili na authority yan Ayaw rin umupo ng jointly. Bakit? Hindi pa nga resolved natin pinag-uusapan pa natin. Voting separately ba o voting jointly? Ay, hindi na mapapayag ang mga senador na voting jointly, massacre yan. Di ba? Para naglaban dyan ang taga-Celtics laban sa isang barangay na basketball team. Talagang yan. And then, takot na naman, I'm not saying, suspecha ko lang, na baka na naman may matanggal. So, if we, I'm willing to stake my honor. Nasabihin ko, there is no way in our lifetime that we will be able to constitute a constitutional convention or meet jointly as a constituent assembly. Bakit? May takot May takot. Ako, nakikita ko lang, ito ang ginagawa natin ngayon, ang tanging pagkakataon natin na magkaroon ng amyenda sa Constitution. Bakit? Ina-assure natin yung ating counterpart na ito lang ang tinitake up natin. Nawawala na ngayon yung suspicion na meron kayong itinatago na politika. Papalitan ng term, o tatanggalin kami, o term limit, etc. At makikita lang, at voting separately, yun nga ginagawa natin di ba? Yun ang guarantee. Ano ngayon ang guarantee nyo? Na ito lang pag-uusapan. Totoo, may amendment, di ba? Pero sa katotohanan ng buhay, sa palagay nyo ba, papayag tayo? Kaya nga natin pinadadali ito para magkaroon ng tsansa na magkaroon ng amendment itong Constitution na to. Otherwise, kung lalagyan na, as it is, itong tatlo na to, ang hirap na Ang hirap na pinagdadaanan natin Meron pa rin question dito. Legal ba itong gagawin natin na to? Sabi nga ni Chief Justice Puno, adopting the Verness version or way will open the floodgates to a constitutional challenge. So be it. Ganun talaga Talaga namang yung opinion na isang member, opinion mo, opinion ko, for so long as it is an opinion, then your opinion is as good as mine. Hanggat hindi nare-resolve yan ng Supreme Court. Ang ibig sabihin, Ito na nga lang tatlo na to. Ang hirap na eh. Kaya lang tayo nagkakaroon ng ganito ngayon. For the first time, nagsalita na ang Senate na we are in favor of a constitutional change. And for the first time, meron na silang ini-sponsor. For us to deviate doon sa ini-sponsor nila, kaya nga natin minirror to give ourselves, our country a chance na mamiyenda natin ang ating constitution. Tama si Rufus. Ako rin naniniwala. May other provisions na kailangan pag-usapan. Katulad sinasabi mo, land ownership, exploration of natural resources. Pero hindi sa panahon na ngayon. Kasi the moment mangyari yan, wala na. We are already writing the death certificate of this proposed resolution. Mawawala yan. Kaya nga ang atin yan, sinisigurado natin sa Senate, kaya nga 100% yung kanyang ginagawa natin para kwentas claras tayo. Ito ang ating ginagawa. Kasi kung hindi natin gagawin to, yung sabihin na, hindi, kailangan talaga jointly assemble tayo. Tanggapin na natin ang katotohanan. If that will be the interpretation of how we should meet and amend the Constitution, then let us all accept the fact that we are stuck with this Constitution.
Yes. Sir Chair, may
Yes,
I,
Representative
may I
Castro.
answer? I agree with with our majority floor leader. Pero ang balik pa rin po ako dun sa tanong ko, Mr. Chair. Because if you are going to approve na nga, Mr. Chair, majority floor leader, etong RBH7 with only 3 provisions. Kasi parang ginagawa natin kasi we are approving a bill, di ba? So darating yung panahon ng amendments. And sabi ni Kong Rufus, mag-a-amend siya, surely, dito. Pero ang dinidiscuss natin, itong 3 lang. Alam niyo po, merong basis yung aking worry, Mr. Chair, Majority Floor Leader, dahil marami nang nangyayaring ganyan. Halimbawa, meron tayong panukalang batas. Kahit na po wala doon sa final committee report, pagdating dito, ang daming mga ina-amend na wala naman doon sa original na committee report. So yun po yung worry ng kinatawang ito, Mr. Chair. Kaya kung 3 lang ito ngayon, baka maging 8 na yan pagdating ng approval natin. Diba? So, yun yung worry natin, Mr. Chair.
Well,
so,
ang masasagot ko na lang ho dyan, hintayin na lang ho natin yung takdang panahon kung mangyayari yun o hindi. Wala na ho akong may sasagot sa ano niya. If the doubt is there, then it will be proven by time. Kung yung kanyang doubt will come about na totoo pala, then we'll just wait for the time kung mangyayari yan o hindi. Otherwise, hindi tayo matatapos
yes, Mr. Chair, talagang procedure talaga yung gusto
Representative Castro
sorry po.
and members of the Committee of the Whole, I would like to remind everyone that we will suspend the hearing in 6 minutes at 3:50 to give way for the plenary session, and we will just take up a couple of business matters. Then we will again adjourn the session and resume again the Committee of the Whole. So we will suspend the hearing at 3:50. Okay, Floor Leader.
To give way to the session scheduled at 4 o'clock this afternoon, I move that we suspend in the meantime consideration of HB 7, Mr. Speaker. So move.
There's a motion to suspend consideration of RBH number 7.
Second.
Objection?
With the caveat, Mr. Speaker, that we will be resuming immediately after the adjournment of today's session. I move that we suspend the proceedings.
Motion is approved. The hearing of the Committee of the Whole is is suspended.
Robbie?
We will immediately resume after the adjournment of the plenary session. We just have to take up a couple of important matters. We would like to ask our resource persons to stay. We are inviting you to have snacks first here at the Legislative Executive Lounge and at the North Lounge. So we'd like to invite our resource person and guest, yes, Justice Azcuna, and the others to stay at the North Lounge